African Renaissance is a very complex kind of idea because it had been articulated since the beginning of the 19th century or perhaps earlier. And I think a large part of it has to do with the idea that in its present usage, that is, that Africa has reached a time when it should be thinking in terms of progress, given all what has happened in the continent since independence in the early 60s. So various scholars are thinking about an Africa that should be a very powerful force to reckon with in the global arena, that is politically speaking, economically, as well as culturally.
The current usage of the term African Renaissance is most closely associated with the rhetoric of former South African President Thabo Mbeki. Beginning with a series of speeches in the 1990s, Mbeki has applied the term Renaissance to describe a far-reaching developmental vision for Africa.
When you ask people what a Renaissance means, they tend to have really positive terms for it. It's the rebirth of classical ideas, the revival of humanism, which that means a lot of things, but I think to most people it means thinking about human beings as essentially good. And I think that idealism, certainly that positive look on people and culture, I think people think that the Renaissance is the pinnacle of what human endeavors can do. And I think that can be a good goal to strive for. However, to strive for that, you have to think of more broadly, of not just striving for a few, but striving for many.
According to Mbeki, any plan to move Africa forward must begin with a rediscovery of the African past. He has cited Africa's numerous cultural achievements prior to colonialism as evidence to reject the common perception that the continent is a backwards primitive land.
I applaud Mbeki for saying let's look at not just politics and science, but that the culture, the arts, music, literature, the visual arts have an important role to play.
Due to the past failures of one-party states, Mbeki views democratic rule as the best course for Africa. However, he has not applied a specific formula for democracy in recognition of the unique characteristics of each country. Mbeki's African Renaissance rejects government-controlled economies in favor of free market trade policies and regional economic associations such as the South African Developmental Community or the Economic Community of West African States. In the social arena, Mbeki has challenged Africans to engage in reform in areas such as issues of race and gender, as well as the curbing of diseases, particularly AIDS. Mbeki has argued the pursuit of these objectives will allow Africa to overcome its troubled recent history and to emerge in the 21st century as a full and equal partner in the global society.
And this rising from the ashes, this has been a recurrent theme in African, particularly modern African history. And with the Pan-African movement and the emphasis at different points on having, like for example today, people talk about having African solutions to African problems. Well, that's another phase or period of assertion where Africans recognize that they have agency. They recognize the fact that they want to be independent truly in reality as well as in name. And I don't know so much that it is a rebirth as in taking that which already existed and moving the detritus of colonialism, the Cold War, and other foreign influences away so that people can actually see the full view of African history and culture and celebrate it and let it do what it did, what it always did for Africa, which is made it a pretty great continent.
Central to Mbeki's Renaissance is the idea that Africa is better off united than separate. This argument for African unity finds its origins in the Pan-Africanist doctrine of figures such as W.E.BDubois and Kwame Nkrumah. The Organization of African Unity was founded in 1963 to promote cooperation among African states. In 2002, the African Union replaced the OAU as Africa's continental body.
You have to think of Africa as the second largest continent in the world. Thousands and thousands of cultures, different people from different who have gone through different historical experiences. So yes, maybe if we want to be idealistic, we can think about African unity, the African Union as one way we could possibly achieve continental unity. How that is going to be done remains the big question, because for me, even the politicians, I suspect, do not have a ready-made answer to that.
The issues are huge, complex, but I think there are ways in which we can accomplish this. One would have to do with geography. We have to be a nation without borders, in the sense in which we rupture those arbitrary boundaries drawn by the French and the British and the Portuguese. We must see ourselves as one entity, as one society. But then, because of the linguistic and cultural fragmentation, we may approach the unity through language. I may be speaking here from the perspective of my discipline. I am a literary scholar, and I look at language as something paramount, as against the historian who will probably focus purely on the historical process and that kind of thing. But I will approach it from a fundamental principle of language. If we go back to pre-colonial African societies, we come to realize that in the east and southern part of Africa, Swahili was the dominant language. And even up to now, Swahili is still spoken along East, Central, and Southern Africa. So that language could be the point of unity of at least 15, 20 countries. The north is Islamic, Arabic. Arabic could be used to unify probably 15, 20 countries. And then Fular, now called Pular, or Mandinka, has been spoken along the west, right on to Central Africa. So I see three languages, Mandinka, Arabic, and Swahili, has been crucial to uniting over 53 countries.
There are some parts of Africa where a renaissance is indeed occurring and has been underway. There are some parts of Africa that are just about as chaotic as you can find a situation. The genocide or raping that's going on in Eastern Congo, I don't know. I'm sure that no one would consider that to be a renaissance effort. However, the continued struggles that go on in South Africa to try and heal from the past of apartheid, the tremendous work being done in Rwanda and Burundi to get past the genocide there in 1994 and what happened in Burundi even earlier than that, even the democratization efforts, here and there you see going on in Cameroon. So you have to look at it, where it's going on the continent. Certainly what happened in Tunisia, what's going on in Libya right now, and who knows how things will turn out in Libya. What's going on in Egypt. We still don't know what the jury's going to bring in as far as the Egyptian military. Will they eventually yield a democratic government, a democratic type of government in Egypt? There are things that are happening on the continent. But this renaissance is probably going to be, like so many other things, driven by the peculiar needs and cultures of the people where you focus your attention, their past, and what their visions are for themselves. But if they do this sort of, if you want to call it a rebirth or a rising from the ashes, every country that does that becomes one more welcome partner in a unified Africa that becomes a global partner and a global competitor.